This is Join Us in France, episode 380, 380. Bonjour, I'm Annie Sargent, and Join Us in France is the podcast where we talk about France. Everyday life in France, great places to visit in France, French culture, history, gastronomy, and news related to travel. Today, I bring you a conversation with Sarala and Thad Terpstra, who are a young couple who moved to France with their young daughter. They applied for a long-stay visitor visa, type D, and things have moved along really well for them. A quick reminder, however, that I do not specialize in relocation to France. This is just a conversation on the experience for this particular family, not advice on how anyone else should proceed. If you're looking for advice on how to move yourself, I recommend you read the book Foolproof French Visas, Complete 2022 edition by Allisson Grant Lounes. She was kind enough to give me a copy of her book, and it is really thorough. It reviews all the visa types, it gives checklists. It's really thorough. It's a big book. There will be a link in the show notes. After the interview, I'll share an update on travel news to France and also my personal update. This podcast is supported by donors and listeners who buy my tours and services, including my very popular itinerary planning service. You can browse all of that at Annie's Boutique, joinusinfrance.com/boutique. And the sales of my voice map tours has picked up quite a bit this March as well, probably because I have a new tour, but also because people are traveling again, which is wonderful. You can follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Just search for Join Us in France. And the episode page as well, where you'll see Sarala's notes. It's going to be at joinusinfrance.com/380 the numeral. Bonjour, Sarala and Thad, and welcome to Join Us in France.
Bonjour, Annie. Thank you for having us.
Bonjour, Annie.
Lovely to have you. And today we're going to talk about your move to France on a long stay visa with a child. And this is not something we had done before. We had talked about people who came to France on a talents visa, early retirees, but never somebody who has a young child, and so therefore, I assume, still working?
Yes, we are still working. Yes, we're both in our 30s. We're not retired yet.
Okay, so tell me about why you chose to move to France, and how did that go?
Well, we are both longtime Francophiles. We're an American couple who had spent time in France in the past. I studied abroad here, and we'd both traveled to France a few times, and we had rented an apartment here for 3 months, as we were allowed to do that as Americans for 3 months. So we absolutely fell in love with France years ago, and over the years we always said we'd like to move to France someday. And then during the pandemic, we started thinking really seriously about it because, as like everyone else, we had more time to think. So we were like, let's do this. Now is a turning point. So we started saving and researching. We applied for our visa. We applied September.
So September 2021.
Yes, September 2021, we applied for the visa.
Wow. So you applied for a long stay visa, but do they know you're working?
Yes, they do, because with the long stay visa, the requirement was that we weren't allowed to work physically in France. We had to actually write a letter for our visa promising that we would not seek employment in France, but we had to also prove how we would financially support ourselves.
Yeah.
So because we weren't retired, we don't have a pension, but we did build up some savings during the lockdowns and stuff. We were building up savings. And then I also teach English online. So we used my online English teaching job and contract to prove our income.
And that was sufficient?
Yes, that was sufficient. It was surprising, actually, because we went into it thinking, I'm not sure if we have enough. But in the end, they approved us. So that was wonderful.
Wow, that's cool. Because usually people who move to France are fairly wealthy, that's the typical path. And so that's exciting that you can do it even if you have, average income, I guess.
Yeah, it was very encouraging to us because we didn't want to wait until we were retired. I will say we don't live in Paris. We chose Occitanie, we chose the south of France, and we didn't choose Provence either. We chose a place that's more affordable to live if you're on a budget and you're a family.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if they factor that in, but our dollar goes pretty far in the area that we live in.
So where do you live? Tell me about the area.
Yeah, so we live in Pézenas, which is about an hour from Montpellier, about 30 minutes from Béziers, so we're kind of in a little triangle there, and about 25 minutes from the Mediterranean, the coast. So we're in a pretty good spot. It's a beautiful location and very well situated, actually. Our town is about 8,000 people and has good connection to Béziers and Montpellier. So either way, we can take a bus there and take trains from there. So we're actually very well situated.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, Pézenas, I've driven through there, but it's been a long time. What's interesting about the town?
It's a beautiful town, very well preserved from the medieval period on. They claim Molière, I think above all, even though I don't think he spent much time here, but they have a big festival for him every year. There's a lot of things dedicated to him, but it's a very well preserved old town. There's a lot of art galleries and they're well known for their artisans as well.
Very cool. So Thad, what kind of work do you do?
So I'm currently not working. I worked all throughout the pandemic. I had a full-time employment there. I worked in e-commerce. So I've kind of taken a break from that. Sarala is busy with her work here, so I kind of took over the role of definitely taking care of our 3-year-old. So I've been doing that, take care of all the extra things that come along with living in France. I take care of all the resident permits, going to get appointments done, all of that. So I've been kind of handling that in the first 6 months here. I've been fairly busy with that.
Yeah, and that's a lot of work. I mean, my husband is trying to apply for French citizenship, which he totally qualifies for because we've been married for a long time. But getting an appointment is a job in and of itself. It's really hard to get those appointments, isn't it?
It is. It's been very difficult to get them. We applied, I think you have 3 months to apply for your resident permit and you get your French social security number within the first 3 months. You're supposed to have a medical appointment as well. And we haven't received any of that. I did that within the first week here and we haven't received anything back. So we're kind of just going to go to the Préfecture next month and really try to hammer those out. Hopefully we can get them. But I know they're very booked up with COVID right now. It's really making things difficult to get an appointment.
Right. What my husband's told me is that there are two factors. There's the COVID, of course, but there's also the fact that a lot of British citizens who live in France have had to apply to be legal to stay in France since the UK is no longer in the EU. And that has created a lot of extra applications and paperwork and things.
That makes sense. Yeah, we've run into a few British expats here.
There's a lot in this area.
There's a lot in this area. And they've said that too, that there are a lot of them are reapplying because they don't get the right of way anymore. So.
Yep. How did you get to know the town of Pézenas?
Actually, we knew we wanted to come to the south because in the past we actually were near Toulouse last time we were in France. We were in Limoux, and we loved it. We liked the cost of living there, and we liked the culture, but we wanted somewhere a little more sunny. So we really liked Montpellier when we came to visit here, and then so when we started looking for apartments in France to pick a town, we just started looking for towns around Montpellier in that area, and that's how we found Pézenas. Is we were on a website called Long-Term Rentals in France, and we zeroed in on the Montpellier area, and that's how we found an apartment in Pézenas. And then we saw that Pézenas was a very beautiful town, and we thought we'd give it a try.
And you've been there since
3 months?
Since November.
Yes, but actually we're going to try out Béziers next. We're kind of trying out different towns in the area to decide what we want to do, if we want to live in the city or the country or a small town. So we're trying out Béziers starting next week, actually.
Oh, you're moving.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
We just had a vacation rental. We've been doing short-term vacation rentals.
And so are these furnished rentals?
Yes, they are fully furnished. The apartment that we stayed in, we've been staying in Pézenas, is owned by a Canadian couple who rents it out when they're not here, which is most of the year except for summer. It's a very beautiful apartment. He's also an artist, the owner, so it's beautifully decorated. It has everything we could need. We didn't have to bring anything. It's turnkey.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. And so in Béziers, are you also renting through long-term rentals in France?
Yes, and we're renting another furnished apartment through long-term rentals in France.
This is a good tip because people say it's really complicated getting your foot in the door, getting a lease in France, because there's the catch-22 of you need a bank account, but to get a bank account, you need a lease. So how did they handle that? How did they handle that?
That was my struggle for the past 2 months. I've been struggling with that. That is the catch-22. Yes, you can't get an apartment in France without a bank account, and you can't get a bank account without an apartment. So we found the way around that is you can open, well, for one, we have the long-term apartment rentals through other expats that live here, own properties. And it works out great because the one we're going to, they actually live here as well. So they're able to write you a letter stating that you are an actual resident residing in their thing for longer than a vacation period. So you're able to take that to the bank, hopefully, and then they should be able to open an account for you in that way. And then the next time we can actually get a long-term apartment through a French landlord. So the process, it could actually work in your favor to do it the way we're doing, just because of that reason. You can work with your landlords if they're here, and they can work that out for you.
Right, because obviously if they live here, if they are Canadian or Anglos that live here, they're aware of this catch-22. French people would look at you like, what? Why is that a problem? Like, yeah. So that's a good thing that, in a way, that they are Anglos and they understand the pain.
They are going through the exact same things, or have at some point in their time here. So it's very helpful, actually. They give a lot of information.
Yeah,
it's a good way to start with long-term rentals.
So have you been able to open a bank account already, or not quite?
Not yet. No, right. I'm working on that because we're moving, so I didn't want to redo with a new address, trying to change that. I wanted to do it from the next one. We're going to be in longer. So I'll apply for that probably in the next 2 weeks. I'll probably start reapplying for the bank account. And our new landlord said that they will assist us.
They will come with us.
Yep, and answer any questions and verify that we will be staying there. So I'll address that again. I started off within the first month trying to open a bank account, and we got rejected. They were helpful, but they didn't really delve too deeply into trying to open it for us.
Yeah, Americans have all sorts of complications because one, there's the French complications that you don't have a lease, you don't have an official address. But then you also have the secondary complication that the US requires all sorts of reporting on what's in your bank account in France, because you're supposed to continue filing taxes in the US as an American citizen. And so they require French banks to do all sorts of paperwork in English, obviously, that French bankers are like, I don't know what this is. I don't want to deal with this. I don't need this customer that badly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah, I ran into there. They talked about that. Our tax laws in the States are very difficult, and they don't really apply to the French. So when you apply they don't like Americans applying for banks for that reason. It's a lot of a headache for them.
Right. Yeah, it creates a lot of paperwork for them, and they don't really want to mess with small accounts. Now, there are some banks. What bank did you try that rejected you before?
Actually, we did take I tried to do a route that was made more sense. I tried to go through HSBC, which has banks in the States, I actually opened an account through them online from here, and then you can open an account from there again in France. But HSBC was going through a transition themselves, so I'm still pursuing that route, but I'll probably end up going through like Crédit Agricole, I think.
Exactly. I was going to tell you that. Forget HSBC. They're not going to help you. They don't help anyone.
Good to know.
No.
Thank you.
No, Crédit Agricole is the way to go. At this time in 2022, if you listen to this episode months and years from now, it might change. But right now, Crédit Agricole actually has people that you can talk to on the phone who are trained to handle expats. So,
good to know.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you if you go into the branch and you tell them that, you explain your situation, they might offer for you to talk to one of these people. And I think they offered it to my husband, but he speaks perfect French and he didn't need that. But there are options, but I think Crédit Agricole is probably the best option for most expats at this point.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, thank you.
And also, applying in a different town will not do you any good because, so Crédit Lyonnais, for instance, they are a bank in the US, and you can see sometimes that a credit union is working with Crédit Lyonnais in the US, and you think, I'll just open an account in this place because then it will transfer to France. It does not. As a matter of fact, banks in France are very segregated, and so the regional Crédit Agricole, the regional Crédit Lyonnais knows nothing about what's happening in a different region. If you move, they can't help you with anything. They have no visibility into your account. That's for safety purposes, which we understand. So if your card would work in a different, in an ATM anywhere in the country, but a person could not look you up and tell you, here's how much you've got left in your account. They know nothing about it. They can't see that. So you have to go to your local branch for a lot of things that you couldn't do anywhere else. So it's really important to have a local branch where you live and not, on the other side of the country.
Okay, that makes sense. And I've heard that story before too, where the next town over won't even bother cashing a check for you, and they have to go back to where they opened the account to actually cash a check or even look at it.
Yep, that's how it works. It's a bit odd, but that's how it works. Okay.
It all works out in the end.
So tell me about the visa that you applied for and how it's working.
Yeah, so we applied for the long stay tourist visa that applies as a resident permit. So we applied for the long stay tourist visa saying we were just going to come here, visit, do research, etc. And that was for the long stay. We ended up with a VLS or a long stay visa with a TS. So it became our resident permit after we got here. So that was the visa we applied for and got.
And so you have to forgive me. I know nothing about these visas. So just like in America, I suppose that France has different visas that can turn into something different eventually?
Yes, of course. Yes, you're right. So ours, we can eventually, ours applies as a resident permit, but there's other long stay visas depending on what your purpose of stay is. There could be some for a student or a person who's coming here to work for a short period of time. You would get a long stay visa. You get a long stay visa with the intent to turn into a resident permit afterwards. Most of those will, after you're here, if there's an issue, you can always change. And we bumped into a lot of people who've said that to us too. So that's what we applied for, was what we thought would be the easiest for us to get. And we intend on changing that in the next year. When we get close to renewing, then we'll be able to apply for a different one. But for now, for our purposes, it was easy to apply for the tourist visa, which is anywhere from, because we could stay technically for 3 months as Americans, but this just extends that up to a year.
And how did you find out about this?
Well, because we are longtime Francophiles and we've been dreaming about moving to France for a while, we've actually been researching this for years, and reading all the stories we can find online and listening to your podcast, I'll say.
Yes.
Too. So we've been listening to other people's stories about how they do it. The situation with us, though, is that, like you said, we're not retired. And the common way for younger people to move to France is through study abroad or au pair or getting a job in France, maybe even marrying a French person. But for us, those weren't options. So we just kept researching, and then that's how we found out about from other people who were freelancers that they moved here because of the long stay tourist visa, which is just basically allows you to live in France, but you cannot work here.
Right. So you have to draw your income from some other country.
Yes.
But you still declare it here?
No. Once, not for the initial visa, you have to prove how much you make to live for a year if you get the year visa. After that, if we apply for our resident permit after this, carte de séjour, I do believe, and then we'll have to, I think, prove that we have to pay into the system more with the next one, which is what we're planning on doing.
Yes.
Otherwise, you can just extend the long stay tourist visa again. But this time, thankfully, we're here. You can do it from here.
Right.
So you don't have to leave.
So the initial application you did from the U.S. at the French consulate, right?
Yes, the French consulate in Chicago. Well, we filled out the application online, and then our local consulate was Chicago. But the whole process has been outsourced to a company called VFS now. So you don't actually go to the consulate anymore. You go to a VFS office, and ours was in Chicago. Okay. And then, we filled out the application. We went in for an appointment. After we had the appointment, it took 9 days for us to receive our passport with the visa inside of it back in the mail.
9 days?
Yeah, it was really fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
Okay. Let me break that down. So you applied online.
Yes.
Then this VFS website gave you an appointment?
The very first step is to apply on the French consulate website in the US or whatever country you're applying from. Once you fill out your application online, they give you an application number. You take the application number and go to the VFS website, and that's where you make your appointment for your interview. And then you go into the VFS center for your appointment. So the consulate and the VFS company work together on the whole thing, but VFS actually handles the whole interview and the paperwork.
And so they ask you to gather up all sorts of papers?
Mm-hmm. They give you a list of documents.
And once you have all of that, you turn that into VFS?
Yes, you bring those to your appointment with you.
Okay.
And they collect them from you there.
And after that appointment, it only took 9 days for you to get your visa?
Yeah, and actually, technically, it took 7. But because our passports were shipped on the weekend, there was a little delay in delivering it to us. But from the time of our appointment to the time they mailed us back, because they give you alerts, tracking alerts, the time they mailed us back our visas was 7 days, exactly 7 days.
Wow.
And that wasn't consistent either, because I think you received all the notifications randomly, and I received them all on one day, the day before we got it. So it's not consistent.
Yeah, but it was fast.
It was
fast. Very fast.
If you had told me 9 months, I would have believed it. 9 days is like, whoa.
Yeah. But we've been researching for a long time, so we came very prepared.
Yes.
We had everything that we thought they could possibly ask for and then some. So we tried to make an airtight case.
Yeah, we had a folder for each of us that had probably our life story in it, about 1 inch thick, and they were pretty happy with it. I mean, they went through it and took what they needed, and that.
Yeah.
And so, are these French people that work for VSF?
Yes, there was the one that interviewed us she was French.
Mm-hmm.
They do it for different countries as well. I think most of them were European countries, but French. I know the lady who interviewed me was French.
And so what did she want to know?
Good question. No, she is supposed to interview each one of us. In the end, they just ended up interviewing me the entire time. I think I sat there for the entire appointment. So that took about an hour and a half. But she just asked basic questions, kind of feeler questions. What was the purpose of our stay in France? What did we intend on doing while we were here? What means did we have to provide for ourselves? It was silent for a while, and then, do you have this paperwork? Where is the extra paper for this? It was kind of just a checks and balances of what we had put in, and with ours, we were very thorough. So I think it kind of helped in our interview to have everything laid out very neatly.
Yeah.
She asked very, very simple questions. That was about it.
That's actually good. I'm glad it's not too painful, That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we heard lots of horror stories, but it was actually, we were very impressed that it was very fluid and very straightforward.
Oh, I was going to say, we've heard from other expats in France who applied for a business visa or a spousal visa that it's more complicated. But it seems like the long stay visa is the most simple, easy one to get, as long as the main thing is that you can prove you can support yourself and you won't be a drain on their system. It seems like if you can do that, it is the easiest route, because there wasn't too much to ask us other than what's your proof of income. There is a list of documents. I'm not sure if you want me to share what documents they actually took from us, but we can share that if you want.
Sure, it'd be interesting to put it as an appendix to this in your guest notes, because some people will want to see the exact details, but obviously that's going to change. And maybe you might, if you're seriously thinking about doing this, you need to apply anyway, and then they'll tell you what they want, because that could change, I guess.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, very true. And just have more. I think that was our big thing, have more than what they needed. And if they asked for it, and then you had it. So it was important for us to just have way more than they needed.
Yeah, French people love paperwork. We just love that stuff. So did it make any difference that you have a daughter?
I don't think so, actually. We were a little nervous going into it because we couldn't find stories of people who had done the long stay visa with a child. But in the end, the only special thing they asked from us was proof of her school registration in France or proof of homeschooling. But she was only 2, so she was too young. So we emailed them asking about it, and they never got back to us. So we just decided to write a letter. And we thought, okay, another personally signed letter can't be bad. So we just wrote a letter saying that she was too young for school, but in the long run, we would apply or register in a French school when we had the chance or when the time came. And then we both signed it as her parents. And they actually did take that letter and submit it to the embassy. So I think that worked.
So was that a sort of déclaration sur l'honneur or whatever?
What was that?
Déclaration sur l'honneur?
I think so, yes. Just our signed, yes, we declare as her parents, yes.
So do you have to do those in French, or can you submit them in English?
We read that you should do a copy in French. We ended up actually submitting all of our documents in English because now that they outsourced to VFS, we had read some recent people's experience that VFS just handles everything in English. So we didn't translate anything to French. We just submitted everything in English.
Well, that is very different, isn't it?
I think things have changed a little.
Yeah, I think the pandemic spurred some changes even here too. You have to used to go to the prefecture to get, after you're here for 3 months, you have to go sign in at the prefecture and let the police know. Everything is online now. They didn't even ask for anything. You literally go back on there, you read through your paperwork or what you sent them, and you approve it, and that was it. They give you your number and pay a little money, and that was it.
How much money?
It was €200. That was quite a hit. We didn't know right away what it was going to cost. So it was €200 per person to apply for, or the resident permit number for like your social security number.
After getting here, it's
yes. After getting here, yes.
But altogether, from the day we applied for our visa to getting to France and reapplying again for the resident permit, it's about $400 per person, the whole process.
For the two adults?
And for the
Also-
child. Each of us cost about $400
Huh.
from start to finish.
Yeah, I have no idea if that's a lot or not.
I don't think it's not bad. It's spread out over weeks and months, so it's
Yeah.
not horrible. It's not like you're working it out day one. It's kind of spread out, so it's not horrible.
So you had to show proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test at the time?
Yes, not for our appointment, but as soon as we got to the airport, it was a requirement. And that was changing rapidly throughout our process. So we had our vaccinations, that was fine. We also applied for the pass sanitaire previous to leaving the U.S. You could do it on the French government website.
Right.
And you just send them your picture of your passport, your vaccination card, and your travel dates and length of stay, and they send it to you. I think they sent it within 3 days after I applied for each of us.
Right, and that has changed. You don't do it that way anymore. But it's interesting
No.
that this was a requirement for flying, but not for applying for a visa.
Yes, not for the visa. No, they did have that at the end. I think we had to sign a document saying we would have those done before we flew, but it wasn't required for the actual visa appointment. They didn't ask for anything. I think they checked our temperature and stuff when we walked in. That was it.
Interesting. And you haven't had to go to the Préfecture yet?
No, it's not required anymore unless you need to change something.
And you haven't talked to a gendarme or anything like that?
Nope, everything was applied online. It even says on the French government website now, it's just as soon as you get in, within 3 months, go to the link in their website and you finish. You have to do it's a process. It's not horrible, but it's a process. You have to get a stamp, an excise stamp, and other things, and then apply it back into the website. But it's pretty straightforward, and it just goes over the information you submitted. And then it registers, and they're supposed to send you an appointment for a medical appointment to get an X-ray. I do believe an X-ray, and then get your registration stamp. But
right, you have to show that you don't have TB.
yes.
Yeah.
I had to show the same when I moved to the US, so that's old news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh, see, I always say that France doesn't change fast, but this is a big change. This whole process is quite different from what I had heard of. And of course, I had to go through all of that in the other direction because I'm born French and applied for citizenship and a visa for the US. And that has changed a lot as well over the years.
I'm sure.
Yeah. I don't know how you would do it today. I have no idea because it's changed so much.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that for my husband, for example, for his application to become a French citizen, they had us go talk to a gendarme about, they wanted to verify that we live together. The gendarme asked us to go to the gendarmerie. So we met there and we chatted with her for 20, 30 minutes. And it was really easy. I mean, it's not like we were sweating bullets. We are married. We have been married for decades. So it's like, what do you want to know? Oh, yeah, he snores.
Exactly.
It's like, okay. It wasn't difficult. And she said, theoretically, she was supposed to visit us at home. But she says, no, I'm not going to come to your home. It's obvious you're married. So, but they didn't do that for you. So who knows?
No.
Maybe when you apply for citizenship, if that's the plan eventually, maybe you'll have to do that.
I think when we apply for the carte de séjour, that's when it starts to change. I think for the long stay, I think they just kind of changed it through COVID, just made it more simplified. But once I think we apply for it and have our actual permanent residence, then I think that will happen.
Yes.
So now that we've got all the paperwork and stuff out of the way, I want to know, was there anything you didn't expect as far as living in France is concerned? Because I think people who want to move to France, maybe they have an idealized vision of what France is like, and maybe it's a big letdown. I don't know. What did you think?
For us, maybe we're not at that point yet. I think we're still on cloud nine because we wanted to move here for so long. It was such a long time dream that, and we had been here before and spent 3 months living here, so we had a little experience of day-to-day life here. So far, I don't think there's anything that's been a major disappointment.
I think everything was a learning curve, but like I said, we tried small towns before, so we kind of knew that going in how to work our budget in our favor, and where to shop. And I think Sarala wanted to add.
I actually do have one, but it's not France's fault. It's my own fault, and it's that last time we were here, we weren't vegan.
Oh yes.
And we loved eating out. We love French dining culture. We love just sitting for hours, and having a full course meal. And we knew that, especially in our area, there's not vegan restaurants or even that many vegan options. But I think it's something we miss quite often.
Yeah.
Now that we are, actually the grocery store options are fantastic, way more than we expected. We can get all kinds of vegan stuff at the grocery stores. But as far as restaurants and dining culture, the vegan restaurants here tend to be more like cafe style, and not the nice traditional, beautiful French restaurants that we love. So we missed that a little bit.
Yeah. Now you say you can get all sorts of vegan stuff at the grocery store. You don't mean like vegan substitution products, like the faux meats and stuff?
Yeah, surprisingly, even in our small little town, we can get it at Carrefour, at Leclerc, at the Bio store. We get the vegan. We can get vegan like chicken. Although we don't eat a lot of that stuff when we're having a craving or we want to treat ourselves. It's nice to have the vegan cheeses, and the vegan French cheese is like the best vegan cheese we've had. So
it's very good.
Okay, we'll probably have to do another episode about vegan because that's just another ball of wax altogether. Yeah. But so nothing really disappointed you? Okay, did you have to go to the doctors yet? Maybe your daughter got sick, and how was medical care?
No. So far, no. We've had no instances we've had to go to the medical care.
So what do you love about being in France? What has that made your life any different? What's it like?
I think, especially as Americans, France is very enchanting to us because we don't have the history right out in front of our faces like you do here in France, the old ancient history, and especially being in the South where we are, the pace of life feels slower here than in the States. Where, if you just want to get one thing from the grocery store, you get in your car and you drive 20 minutes and here you can just go. We actually live above a spar, so we just walk downstairs and grab the one thing. And we love getting our bread every morning. We love going for our walk and seeing everyone sitting at cafes. And we love that there's always random stuff going on in the town. Like there will randomly be a parade or like there's always a reason to party here. Yes. So yeah.
Well, it feels random to you, but it's not at all. The celebrations in villages and small towns, they just repeat every year. And so people know, so people know that.
We always feel like we missed the memo, like we didn't, whereas like, what is it today? Like, what's going on? And look out the window and there's a whole band going through the streets and a parade and costumes. And like, we always feel like we're missing out. So I think we have to figure out where to go.
No, the thing is, okay, when I first moved home to France, I was surprised by a lot of things. As a matter of fact, the closing music for this podcast was a complete happenstance. I just happened to hear the marching band going by my house, and I ran out with the recorder and recorded them playing that, and I loved it. I've been using that piece.
It's very catchy.
That's interesting. That's really good.
But it was just happenstance, But now I know that the marching band, they have a set schedule, and so I can expect them to be playing. It kind of starts in June, and they do 2 concerts in June, and then they will do the 14th of July, and then we don't see them until September again. But in season, we know more or less what's going to happen. And around the celebrations for the end of the First World War, Second World War, you always hear the band coming out to march, and the mayor will carry a thing of flowers and all of that, but it repeats every year. So you have to be there a while before you're like, that's what's happening.
That's the secret.
Makes sense, yeah.
We're like, where do we find out about that? Everyone here just seems to know that there's going to be a parade today, or that they're supposed to wear a costume today. We're like, where do we find this information? And I went to the Mary's office, and they said they don't have a list to give me. So
no, they don't. They don't. And so in February, the little kids are probably going to walk around. There's going to be the Carnaval, and I don't remember what day they do this. But in my village, every year, all the school kids, they dress up and they do a march around the village. And, and it's just the same day every year, Yeah. So maybe their website, maybe the Pézenas. Well, you're going to Béziers anyway. That's a big town compared to Pézenas.
It is.
Yes, much bigger.
What's the advantage to you of going to a bigger town?
Well, for us, we don't have a car as of yet either. So for one, we wanted to do more traveling through all of France, and we love the convenience here. The public transportation here is phenomenal compared to the States. As you know, it's way more easy. It's easier to get around. So for us, Béziers was great. We can go from there, catch a quick train to Narbonne, Toulouse. We can go wherever we want. And it was just for us with a younger daughter, it was great to be in a smaller town, but right where we're at right now, we kind of want a little bit more to do.
A bigger.
Yeah, there's just more to do in Béziers. We would love to go to Montpellier eventually, but Béziers has kind of the same feel, and it has more activities for us to do, and especially with a young daughter, it's a little nicer for that.
It's close to the beaches.
Yeah, a little closer to the Mediterranean as well.
Right. So the closest beach it used to be to Béziers was Valras-Plage.
Yes.
So that's the one I went to as a kid all the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And Valras-Plage has a big campground. It used to be at the entrance of the village, but by now I'm sure it's grown so much it's in the middle of the village. And they have a wonderful summer program. All the time in the summer, in the evening, they have bands and they have all sorts of things. So all of July and August, you'll have free entertainment at Valras-Plage.
Oh, nice.
Oh, wow. That's good to know.
Yeah, sounds wonderful.
Yeah. And the beach is very nice. They've added a lot of games and things for kids to do on the beach. It used to be just sand and rocks. That's what I grew up with. But it's a beautiful sandy beach. But but now they've added, stuff for volleyball and basketball, soccer, all sorts of toys and things that the kids like a playground, but on the beach. It's pretty cool.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And I'm quite sure that there are going to be regional buses between Valras-Plage and Béziers.
You did read that.
Yes, and you really don't want to be driving into Valras-Plage because parking is a bear. So
I believe it. It's always really tight anyway, and that's why we're kind of happy we don't have a car yet until we're in a more solid place where we want to be. We're finding a place to park and keep it there. It's really difficult.
Yeah. So you'll enjoy Valras-Plage this summer. And then I think there's a new one that they didn't used to have called Sérignan-Plage. And Sérignan is not quite on the coast, but it's not very far. And so I think they just developed a piece of the beach that belongs to Sérignan that was wild before. And now, but anyway, it has been decades since I've been to that part of the country, so it's been too long. But yes, I spent many, many wonderful summers in Valras-Plage.
That is so sweet.
That sounds fantastic, yeah.
We can't believe that we live this close to the Mediterranean,
Yeah.
It's like, It's right there, just 20 minutes.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. In the summer, it's
Yeah.
absolutely fabulous.
And even in the winter here, I think that's another reason we love this area. I'm not sure about the market in Toulouse, but the markets here are just even in the winter, they're overflowing with like gorgeous oranges and lemons and all the beautiful fruit.
Yeah.
And it's sunny almost every day. So though it is cold, it puts you in a good mood because the sky is so blue and it's very sunny. So it definitely has a Mediterranean feel.
Yes, and that's very different from Toulouse. I mean, Toulouse gets foggy and yucky. All of January has been foggy and yucky pretty much. So
we've had a pretty good January. I guess we can't complain.
Yeah,
It's pretty sunny today.
And we're from Michigan, so we feel you.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Michigan. Oof.
Yeah. Yeah. So for us, even if there was 3 days of sun in the winter, we're happy.
You'll get a lot more than that.
Yeah.
A lot more than that. All right. So, any last words of wisdom for listeners who would love to do this? What kind of encouragement would you give them?
I would say go for it. Like we've talked about in the beginning, we didn't have a ton of money. We're not rich, but we had a little bit of means to support ourselves. And I think you should, if you think that you have enough to live here, which I do think the cost of living can be a lot lower depending on how you do it, can be a lot lower than the US or maybe the UK. I think you should go for it. And also, one thing we didn't cover is right now with COVID, the passport, at least in the US, Thad had to renew his passport because it was running out. And that took half a year, 6 months. So it's a good thing he started early. So just a heads up.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
That is really a kind of a bright message for people because people think, oh, to move to France is going to be really complicated, which I thought too. And it's going to be really expensive. Maybe it's not that bad. And you need to be a millionaire and be able to buy a chateau in Provence or whatever. But you don't have to do it that way.
Yeah, and I think you should, maybe be willing to compromise too. That we would love to have a house and we'd love to have a car and all of that. But right now we live in a very simple but beautiful apartment. We don't have a car and we have a pretty low cost of living. So it's a wonderful trade-off for us.
I think if I could add to that too, is that's key is going into it with the right expectations. France is very affordable. Even with your money, I think goes a lot further here to us. It feels like anyway, because the public transit is so good and quality of food and cost of living is fairly low. You can so we get a furnished apartment for a lot less than what we paid in the States. So it's a fair trade-off, and if you go to the small villages, and for people, that's what I'd encourage them, go outside of the big cities. You'll end up spending way more in the city anyway.
Béziers is a city.
Yeah, but even Béziers, it's very affordable. We found a very affordable apartment, furnished. So it's doable. It's very doable.
Yeah. I think people also, they think, oh, I want to go to Paris because Paris, that's amazing. But Paris is a lot more expensive, probably 3-4 times more. Somebody on the Facebook group moved to Paris recently, and I think she said she rented a place in the Saint-Germain-des-Prés area. So it's 35 square meters, which is what? Really small. Like it's probably 200-300 square feet. And she pays around 1,500 euros a month. Right?
That's a lot. Yeah.
For a small place.
So, and my daughter is looking for an apartment right now, and she's looking in the Gers in l'Île Jourdain. So it's another, minor town. And she found one for 620 for 60 square meters.
Oh, wow.
That's good.
That's not bad. That's not bad.
Yeah.
So if you get out of Paris, there's lots and lots of beautiful places in France where you can make a perfectly fine life. And
Exactly.
And it's very well connected. Yeah, those small towns have regional buses that will go there every day. I know we can get from our place to Montpellier, which you can get from there anywhere in France. You can get there in an hour on a bus or 40 minutes. It's very well connected.
And we still have museums and cafes and art and a lot of the things that draw people to Paris, history, they have that all over France.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, and if you go to a town that has a train station and a regional train network, then really, like Béziers, did Pézenas have a train station still?
It's gone now, but they have more regional buses. Now they have a big bus station that's here now, which is nice. So there's always a bus going somewhere. Mm-hmm. So that's nice.
But you can get from Béziers to Paris in 3 hours?
You can get from Montpellier, it's 3.5 hours by speed train. And I did that recently, and it was very easy. I was in Paris in less than 5 hours total.
Yeah. So it's high speed Montpellier till Paris, right?
Yes.
Right. So however long it gets you to get to Montpellier. And then, and this is another thing that people need to consider. So for people who want to go to Provence, for instance, it's high speed until Avignon. But then if you want to go to Nice, it's, so Paris to Avignon is 2 hours and 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. But then Avignon to Nice is 2.5 hours. Because you're on the slow train.
Yes.
I mean, you have trains constantly. You have trains like 20 times a day. Mm-hmm. But it takes a long time. So if that's a big consideration, try to go to a city that has fast TGV,
the fast train,
trains to Paris, because then you're in Paris in no time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, exactly.
We took that into consideration. We can, if we have an itch for Paris, like we thought, maybe we can go for a weekend here and there. Mm-hmm. We just go to Montpellier, which is an hour, and then we take the speed train. Or actually, Béziers also has an airport, so we can take a flight too.
All right. Well, wonderful to talk to you. Thank you so much for opening my eyes to all sorts of things I didn't know about.
Thank you for having us, Annie. We appreciate it.
Yeah, and we love your podcast.
Yes.
You are most welcome, and I am glad to be sharing good information for people, the real stuff that we all have to deal with. Merci beaucoup.
Well, thank you very much.
Au revoir.
Au revoir. Take care, Annie.
Au revoir, merci.
Again, I want to thank my patrons for supporting the show and giving back. Patrons get several exclusive rewards for doing so. You can see them at patreon.com/join us, Patreon. Join us, no spaces or dashes. Thank you all for supporting the show. Some of you have been doing it for a long time. I am so grateful for you. And a shout out this week to new patrons, Richard Porter and Mike. Thank you so much for becoming patrons and making this podcast possible. Elise and I will do a new behind the scenes video recording next week for our patrons. And to become a patron of Elise, go to patreon.com/EliseArt, ELYSART. My thanks also to Michael Robinson for sending in a one-time donation by using the green button on any page on Join Us in France that says Tip Your Guide. Another way to support this podcast is to hire me to be your itinerary consultant. Let me explain how this works. You purchase the service on joinusinfrance.com/boutique, and then you tell me what you have in mind. I do my research. I write up what I think is best for you. Sometimes I have to pop people's bubble, but, it's for the better. And then we talk about it on the phone. You get to ask me all your questions, and voila, you're ready for a great trip to France. This week in French news, COVID numbers were plunging in France the last few weeks in a row, and they are now heading back up a tiny bit. Again, not by much, 2% uptick week to week. The same is happening in England and possibly in other countries. I haven't verified that. French health authorities blame it on the BA2 subvariant of Omicron that can reinfect people who've had COVID before. And of course, these people still aren't vaccinated. Some of them have had COVID 2-3 times, but they still hope for natural immunity, and it's really not happening. It seems like this new variant is not as nasty, but, I wonder how long it will take for these people to realize that vaccination is wonderfully effective and catching COVID is a bad idea. I don't know how long it'll take, but I am hopeful. At any rate, the French health authorities are not too concerned. We're still going ahead with removing mask mandates and vaccine passes, except when it comes to public transportation and nursing homes. I'll keep wearing a mask in stores and at museums and such, but it will not be mandatory. So starting tomorrow, France is very much where the United States has been for several months. Most US states had no vaccine mandates and no mask mandates of any sort. Well, now we don't either. Hopefully, it's not going to lead to a rise in COVID numbers, but if it does, they'll put the vaccine pass and mask measures in place again. But there is no talk of that at this time. In France, the number of ICU patients due to COVID is still down sharply. So are deaths due to COVID, but these are lagging indicators. So we know ICU admissions will go up in 2 to 3 weeks. And, for the number of deaths to go back up, it'll take more or less 6 weeks. Everyone in France is still shocked by the invasion of Ukraine by Russia and the terrible human toll taking place there. European leaders held an emergency meeting in the Versailles Palace, which meant that the palace was closed to the public for 2 days with no notice other than an announcement on Twitter, which I retweeted, but it's possible for these places to close, especially Versailles, with no notice. Like they just need the place and they close it down. So keep an eye on Twitter for last minute kind of notices. Ukraine would like to join the EU, and this is nothing personal, but joining the EU takes time. Countries need to make a lot of changes to their laws, their taxes, their finances. All sorts of things need to happen before they can join the EU successfully. So I wasn't surprised by the decision. But the support of the people of Ukraine is getting organized. France is taking in refugees, not as many as bordering countries, but it's starting to happen. France has the capacity to absorb a lot of refugees. Remember, we took in 500,000 refugees from the Spanish Civil War. The need is great here again, and I hope we do it. Most Ukrainians would like to go back to their homes at some point, but seeing the bombing, the death and destruction that Russia is inflicting on the people of Ukraine, it may be a while. In much happier news, the city of Paris is working hard to remove as many cars as possible from the city center. My friend Patricia, who lives in Paris, sent me an interesting article by Adèle Peters in Fast Company. I'll link to it in the show notes. Here's the first paragraph. In Paris, roughly half of the city's public space is dedicated to cars. But the city has been fighting to reclaim that space, turning a highway along the Seine River into a park and walking path, redesigning intersections to prioritize pedestrians, giving more space on one of the city's busiest streets to bikes, that's Rue de Rivoli, banning cars on some streets near elementary schools, and planning dozens of miles of new separated bike lanes. Now, this is me not reading the article. If you let them, and we have, cars will take over the world. And I'm not saying that cars should be banned completely. I use a car, a lot, and I like my car, but some cars need access, like local residents, delivery drivers, taxis, buses, ride-sharing vehicles, disabled people, and people going to work in an area. But people like me driving through Paris because Waze decided it would save me a few minutes, really, it's fine for Paris to say, no, you're not coming in. I don't need to be there. And every city in France should do that, in my opinion. I think you'd like this article, and I'll link to it in the show notes so you can see the whole thing. The French presidential election will take place on April 10th and 24th. The polls are looking like Emmanuel Macron is going to be re-elected. But since it's elections and not polls that decide who wins, it's best wait until it's done. We have 12 candidates running, including 2 nut jobs on the far right and 2 nut jobs on the far left. Several that you've never heard of, and I haven't either. Well, I've heard of them, but, I don't really know that much about them. They have no chance of making it. But again, you never know. Emmanuel Macron has done something that I think is brave and will serve him well. He's announced that if re-elected, he will try to move retirement age to 65. It's still at 62 in France, one of the few rich countries to have kept retirement age so low. Of course, his opponents are all up in arms about it, but if he gets re-elected, he'll be able to push this reform forward, having just earned re-election. It won't stop people from going on strike over it, you understand, but it'll probably pass. Unless he doesn't get re-elected, and then all bets are off. For my personal update this week, this week was the first time in several weeks where I had reserved a couple of days work free for myself. So I spent 3 hours weeding my big flower bed, and my legs are still complaining about bending down over and over again so many times. I have one of those nifty kneel sit garden tools, but I didn't use it much, which was a big mistake. Next weeding session, I will use the garden stool, even if it slows me down. And this was a bit shocking to Elise, who thought we should have waited at least a few months. But we have reclaimed our daughter's bedroom. It was quite empty anyway, because when she moved, she took her queen bed and her desk. So without a bed, and it's not a bedroom anymore. So we hired someone to paint it, and my husband will move his office into our daughter's old room, freeing up our guest room just in time for family and friends to visit again, we hope. When our daughter comes to stay, she'll sleep in the guest room where there's a bed, Is that crazy? I don't know. How long did you wait before reclaiming your children's old bedrooms? This week, I spent an interminable 5 hours at IKEA looking for a sofa and shelves for both my house and my daughter's new apartment. I found what I needed. It's good, and I got to work organizing my office better, but it took a long time. I have been collecting a lot of books purchased from museum stores all over the country, and they are a handy-dandy resource. But they need shelf space. So it's been a really satisfying week, weeding and organizing, which doesn't happen all that often for me. Next time I get a day off, I'll see if I can bring myself to organizing my linen closet. That's going to be a big job, but it needs to be done. This week I listened to 2 great books, The Premonition by Michael Lewis, a book about the history of the CDC and a few recent pandemics. It's a really good book. I do recommend it, and it's on Audible. The second one is completely different. It's called Personal Recollections of Joan of Arc by the Sieur Louis de Conte. It's by the great Mark Twain. It's on LibriVox, and so it's a free book. It's read by John Greenman, a lovely narrator who did a great job reading all the French names. He rolls his R's, which is not something we do today, but it really adds to the charm. The story is told from the point of view of Sieur Louis de Conte, supposedly Joan's page, secretary, and childhood friend. Twain did an outstanding job with the history and added his witty remarks as well as lyrical descriptions at times. I think it's a really enjoyable book for anyone who's interested in French history. I will link to both of these books in the show notes. The weather in Toulouse alternates between beautiful days and rainy days, which is normal for March. My daughter was driving to Toulon this morning. She got rain all the way, heavy sometimes, but as soon as she got past Montpellier, it was full sun and dry. It is true that it rarely rains on the Mediterranean coast, something to note for those of you looking for sunshine. We are seeing a lot of signs of spring, including weeds coming back with a vengeance, and that's wonderful. Show notes for this episode are on joinusinfrance.com/380, where you can see a recap of what we've discussed, as well as links to the things I've mentioned and a full transcript of this episode, as well as Sarala's notes. If you enjoy the show, please introduce a friend to the podcast and point them to the episode that got you hooked, if you can remember it. Maybe it's been too long. Next week on the podcast, an episode with Elise about Saint-Denis Cathedral, one of the jewels of Gothic architectures in the world, a beautiful cathedral not far from central Paris. Send questions or feedback to Annie@joinusinfrance.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you join me next time so we can look around France together. Au revoir. The Join Us in France Travel Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2022 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.